Hey Vsauce, Lewis here. Or not. In my last educational video I got a few comments saying how I was a bit like Vsauce, and while I can't disagree, is that really a bad thing? I mean, I got mostly positive feedback from the videos, so why not take it one step further for one video? Either way, the idea that it could have been a bad video simply for the fact that it was a bit like Vsauce is kind of ridiculous.
Math has been around for a very long time, and while most people see it as very precise and calculated, if you know what you're doing, you can create mathematical paradoxes, in a way. A paradox is a seemingly absurd self-contradictory statement or proposition that, when investigated or explained, may prove to be well-founded or true. So, for me to say that 1 plus 1 equals 1 would go against the answer most people would know to be 2. Of course, if you limit the numbers to a finite state, only allowing them to be only numbers, and not include fractions and decimals, then yes, you will get the answer 2 as expected. But when you allow yourself to use all the numbers available to you, you can do so much more. To say that we are dealing with your everyday use of numbers would be wrong. 1 plus 1 equals 2 in the real world, but this isn't the real world. This is math. When dealing with it in just the sense of logic that is to be expected with the real world, these conditions don't apply. But we aren't applying these to any real world equivalent. I'm simply going to display them as I see them. But that's not to say that there aren't any sort of real world paradoxes that can be created with them. In fact, there are quite a few. They do require infinite point densities and things of the such, so no matter what, we wouldn't be able to use them. In the physical universe, we will never be able to measure something infinite, but when using math, we kind of can. It's not to say that we are able to count infinity or anything like that. It's more that we understand what it means and are able to apply it in math. So, let's do that. The first thing you need to understand when dealing with infinite amounts is the fact that, as the definition goes, infinity is unending. Therefore, if we were to say that something comes after infinity, we would simply be wrong. There are many things contained within infinity, but that doesn't mean there's a literal bigger number. Think about it this way: if you have one number that is infinite, by definition there could be no possible other number that comes after it. Infinity plus infinity is still just infinity. So we aren't going to go much further than the number 1 in this video, because no further would be required. But what is required is for me to use decimals. You see, there are an infinite amount of numbers in between 0 and 1. That is, when you're counting decimals. In fact, the first number is not 1, but is actually 0.000000000, and so on. While you do have your 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, there are also the ones in between as well, such as 0.11, 0.21, 0.31, and so on. The point is, there are an infinite amount of numbers, even just from 0 to 1. But really the question is, because of this fact, does that mean that 1 is an infinite amount? I mean, we know what the number 1 is supposed to mean, but that doesn't mean that getting there is an actual possibility. In reality, there are not infinite amounts of numbers. There are only 3 numbers, 2 of them being infinite. There is negative 0.0000 and so on for an infinite amount of time until you hit 1. There is also the number 0 on its own. Then there is also positive 0.0000, and that also continues for an infinite amount of time until you hit 1. So why do I say those are the only numbers? Well, it's simple. No jump is big enough to bypass infinity. While 1 on its own has its own meaning, that doesn't take away from the fact that you could not simply jump to it as we do. If infinity was a wall, and we wanted to jump over it, no matter how high we would jump, there would always be more wall. So it's not just something you can skip over. But instead of looking at it as an infinite amount, let's label it as a group. So instead of trying to count past this first infinite amount, we simply state it as its own group. This is what will allow us to get past the first wall. Well, it's not so much that we are getting past it, and more that we are just able to see the next wall. So let's just do the same thing to the next number, then the next, and the next, and the... Well, as you can tell, we've ran into a bit of an issue. There is always a next number to group. So now not only are we working with infinite numbers, but infinite amounts of infinite numbers. While sure, we could group the groups of numbers, we wouldn't get anywhere because there would also be an infinite supply of those groups as well. The problem with this is the fact that you can continue grouping forever and not get anywhere. So what do we do now? Well, it's simple. All we need to do is declare the existence of the number 1 and group everything before it as its own infinite amount that describes the number 1. And because of this, we have now made 1 equal to infinity. Why this works is because I'm not using the number 1 in the sense of it being a totality. In fact, I'm doing quite the opposite. If 1 didn't equal infinity, then that would be to say that fractions couldn't be infinite amounts. As I stated earlier, the first number is infinite. While it is still being considered a number, the term infinity itself isn't a number, but it simply describes an unending amount. So that doesn't mean that numbers on their own can't be infinite. So does the number 1 describe a singular amount, or does it describe an infinite amount? Well, it's both. It describes one set of continuing infinite sets. So, with this in mind, there's nothing more to say. Infinity plus infinity equals infinity, just as 1 plus 1 equals 1.